Are live, Facebook Live, another Tuesday at 1 o'clock, and we are thanking and hoping that you are joining us. And I have special guest, infamous special guest, Jim Burns from Homeward Bound. And Jim, thanks for joining us. And also thank you for preaching on Sunday. I appreciate that.
I told you before we started, I love your church. Your people are so warm and they're so friendly, and they're just great people.
Well, it's been a while since we've had you, but I'm glad we did. And a super encouraging message on how to finish well.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to dive into a little bit. And if you're joining us for the first time, we just want you to know that this is your meeting. This isn't just us, one-way communication. We already did that on Sunday. This is now the opportunity for you to ask your clarifying questions or, yeah, but what about? And like we said, no question is a bad question. If it's off topic, we may delay talking about it because our goal is to focus on what Jim preached on Sunday. But we're going to talk about everything. And also, I just want to give you a reminder before we jump in. If you're not part of PCC's Facebook private group, you need to be there. And for a couple of reasons. Number one, resources from this program right now will be posted in there. So some of Jim's resources will provide the links for further reading, but also we're launching a grow group there. We're going to be doing midweek ministries there, and to do it in a live setting just doesn't work, but it will work in the PCC Facebook page group. So please jump in there, and then we'll keep you posted. But hey, Jim, by way of getting the ball rolling here, why don't you just give us a quick summary of what you talked about on the weekend, and then we can take it from there.
Well, I kind of teased at the beginning, Mark, where I said, when we start talking about finishing well, we think it's for old people. And because old people think about finishing well, and young people don't. And I wish I would have thought more about it, frankly, in my younger years. And a man who you probably know named Gordon MacDonald, who was an incredible pastor on the East Coast. I was about 28 years old, and Gordon said to me, Jim, you're going to make it. If you make it to 40, God is going to use you greatest if you make it. Meaning you're running so fast, you're flying like crazy, and sometimes people can drift and really veer off. And you and I both have people who are friends who we know that they crashed and burned because they didn't take care of it. And so I find that if we start thinking about finishing well early or late, but earlier the better, we're building a foundation that helps us really make good decisions about our relationship with God, our relationship with our family, our relationship, with our community, our relationship with our church. But if we're just kind of living our life by circumstance and chance, then, people drift like crazy. And so we talked a little bit about drifting, but my point on this, and I used a phrase, significance in a well-lived life is never accidental. And I did some work on a project called Finding Joy in the Empty Nest. And it was a book actually for people, obviously, who are empty nesters. But I started asking really key questions. It was during COVID. So I was running Facebook groups, if you would, and we would just say, tell me what you've learned. And I would talk to really good people. I found that there were two types of people. The people who were doing well in the empty nest were people who were proactive and intentional about their faith, about so many things. The people who weren't doing well were just kind of doing life without really, looking at it for a reason. And I again, even with the talk, I talked about, the fact is that we are saved by grace, not on our own, of course. But sometimes we have to learn how to discipline ourselves, roll up our sleeves and discipline ourselves. And I think I even, in one of the services, I didn't, but I quoted 1 Timothy 4:7 says, discipline yourself for the purpose of godliness. I think we need some discipline in our lives to finish well. I know I do. So what I was trying to do is encourage people to really take a look at your life and see what's been uncultivated or unattended in your life, and then work on it. And then I've just finished with this one. It was interesting for me because this is not a talk I usually give. As you know, I talk about families and marriage and things like this. And this was more of a message for me, a sermon message. And I started talking at the beginning about the soul. And I said, the soul is integrated into every aspect of our life, outside, inside. And I watched people kind of like, at least in my opinion, they kind of started to gear in. And then I said, a soul that is healthy has healthy relationships, a healthy relationship with God, healthy relationships, you're kind of doing well. But a soul that's not healthy is filled with chaos and clutter and brokenness and pain. And I said, the reason I know that is because I've done that, obviously, at times. We all have. And it was interesting because I watched people kind of shake their head. I felt like that was something that was just almost a throwaway. You know how you do a message, Mark, and you don't, you're looking at, I'm trying to get to the scripture, but I said that part and I went, whoa, I think I identified with a lot of people who maybe were in that place where they either had relatives who were, kind of chaotic, life was chaotic and broken and whatnot, and that kind of made sense, or not taking care of their soul, or they were like that. And that was an interesting thing. And then I think sometimes we need a roadmap. And I felt like, for me anyway, Hebrews 12 recently, this is kind of more recent for me because I love Hebrews 12, but Hebrews 12 recently has kind of been my roadmap to finish well. And so that's why I gave those 4 points. And those 4 points to me were trying to be as practical as possible to say, great, I want to finish well. But a lot of us go, well, I don't have any idea how to do that. And I feel like the writer of Hebrews in those first 3 verses kind of gives us that roadmap. And so we talked about the roadmap. So anyway, that was it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And it's the challenge, and I'm not sure how you get, well, I've never met somebody yet that doesn't wish they kept their high school car. I've never met somebody at our age that isn't saying, oh man, if I would have kept that car. In other words, if I'd have had the presence of mind in high school
right.
to keep the car until I'm older, I would be better off, which highlights that it's really hard to have that finishing well presence of mind when you're younger. It seems like it's organized when you're younger. Like if you join like for your first point, basically find someone to run with you, someone to mentor you. Well, when you're in sports, you got that coach that's running with you. But when you get past all that, now you're just trying to make it happen. What are the practical steps that some younger person can take to find that mentor?
Yeah. Hey, interesting enough, Mark, that was a question I got in the patio at PCC a lot by the younger. You have a lot of young families there, and it was mainly men who came up and asked me that. And what I said was, don't go up to somebody and say, will you be my mentor? Okay. And don't go to the pastors because they're already mentoring people. Okay. And maybe that's going to be a thing. But I said, go to somebody and say, can I go to lunch with you? And say, hey, do you mind if I have 4 questions I want to ask you? And so if somebody says, will you be my mentor? A lot of people go, I can't be a mentor. I'm not a mentor. I don't have it all together either. But if you just do that. So there's a man, in fact, he's from San Clemente. His name is Jim Slevko. I don't know if you ever ran into Jim. He's passed away now, right the week before COVID hit in March was his funeral. And I remember Kathy and I loved their parenting style. Their kids were older than my kids, and we weren't raised in a Christian home. And so one time we said, wow, they are such attractive parents and their kids are doing good. So we just simply said, can we invite you guys to dinner? So we went down to Avila's, there in San Clemente, and we asked them some parenting questions, and they gave us some good ideas. And then they also laughed at us going, your kids are teenagers. They're going to act like that. Get over it. Get past it. Right. They didn't even give us advice. They just went, oh, of course, they're 13 and 14. They're going to act like that. Right. But we started a relationship with them, Mark, that was so great. And I would say at his funeral, he, right before his funeral, he wasn't doing well, but he probably would have said, oh, I'm not Jim and Kathy's mentor. But they truly became our mentors. I was with one of my mentors today via Zoom. He's in Park City, and he's a part of a small group. And he's the founder of Pacific Care, which is a big big HMO type of a thing. Wonderful man. He was the chairman of the board of Mariners. And Kathy and I have done the same thing with him and his wife. And he's probably 7 years older than me. But I learned from him just by talking to him what he does with his kids as adults. Our kids are adults, and so how do you do life with your adults? And I imitate him. I know we're supposed to imitate Jesus, but even when Paul said, be imitators of me, that first bugged me. That's in the Bible. Be imitators of me. I'm like, Paul, you're not Jesus. We're supposed to imitate Jesus. I'm going, I would do well if I would try to imitate Jesus, but if I imitated Paul, I would do fine. Well, sometimes I go, his name's Terry. What would Terry do? in this case. So, you know, we've made decisions with our family over and over again going, that's what Terry does. We're going to follow Terry's, you know, input and advice. So I think you just go after them.
Yeah.
Sometimes they stick, by the way, and sometimes they don't. Now, I also mentioned that if a younger person, if you want to find a mentor, then let's say you're a parent, a young parent, then I think you read parenting books, and all of a sudden you go, oh my goodness, this guy's books work for me. So then read every book you got on that. Okay. I actually have a mentor who's younger than me. I am a friend of Andy Stanley, who's a pastor who you would obviously know. And he's in Atlanta, and I go over there and speak sometimes, but I pretty much listen to every one of his messages because he resonates with me. So I'm active at a church. I love our church. I love our pastor, but Andy also kind of teaches me scripture in a way that just really motivates me. Tim Keller was like that for me as well. So I find people and then I kind of glob onto them. They don't even know I'm globbing, right? That may be a new word.
I'm sure they'd appreciate to know you're globbing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, I remember talking to Tim Keller, one of the most famous, you know, people in our generation of ministry people who passed away in the last month. And I remember saying, you know, Tim, I listen to most everything you do. And but for him, it's more of a podcast type of a thing. And he goes, you do? And I'm thinking, wait, there are thousands of people who do. But he was just he was like honored by it. He said, well, if you ever have any questions, call me. What? You know, I never did. But it was the kind of thing where he was so pleased that I was taking the time to listen to him. And so these people, I was talking to one of the young men at your church, and I said, oh, they're not going to be offended by you saying that. They're going to actually appreciate you saying, can I get together can I buy you coffee or whatever? Start that way, and then, you know, you build that way. I think that's a neat way of doing it.
No, I think that's good counsel because when you use buzzwords like mentoring or discipling or those kinds of things, then people, well, it's like we were talking about before we went live. We were talking about fly fishing. Well, if somebody's a fly fisherman for 20 years and somebody's just starting out, they may not view themselves as an instructor, but they got enough fly fishing experience to pass some things on.
Right.
That if they just go up to somebody and say, hey, can I go to lunch or whatever? I want your opinion on something. I want your insight on something.
Right.
That's probably
right. I think people appreciate that. And sometimes, like I said, with even mentors, and I think we who are older should be mentoring somebody. But we were in the store, we were at Ralph's. I live in Dana Point. We're at the Ralph's over by Ocean Ranch, and Kathy and I are in there. And this guy comes up, and I had done the premarital counseling, and then we found out he had no family in the area, he and his wife, and then they had a baby. And so we said, hey, you guys need to go on a date. Can we watch your baby? So we apparently were safe to them. So they said, sure. So then we're in Ralph's, and he's with a friend of his, and he comes up and he goes, hey, this is Jim and Kathy. These are our marriage mentors. And I said to Kathy, do you know that we're their marriage mentors? Well, it was just that it was more by just relationship. So that's one of the, you know, and there are different types of mentoring. I mean, Jesus mentored the disciples by living with them and being real. Eli and Samuel had a mentoring relationship, and he was taught how to listen to the word of God, and he was instructed that way. So sometimes that's it. You mentor people on Sundays. You mentor people from the pulpit. That's mass mentoring. And we need all kinds of types of mentoring, but there's different types of mentoring. And sometimes it's in a formal, like you were saying, even with your Facebook Live, you guys may do some group experience. Well, sometimes that's mentoring in a group on a more formalized basis. People use Homeward. We have courses. So people will take our courses, they'll put them online besides doing it, you know, in their small groups, but they'll put it online. And now there's a mentoring thing that's going on because they watch us for 7 minutes, and then the rest of the time is, you know, them talking with each other. So lots of ways to do it. And that's the beauty of it. I call it personally tailored discipleship, which means you may really be influenced greatly by somebody, and I may not resonate with them. So I mentioned Tim Keller, and you may go, you know, I like Tim Keller and he's a godly man, but I really want to go, I listen to, and then you name somebody else. How great is that? It's personally tailored.
Yeah. So let's flip the clock here. We went to the younger group, not knowing. Let's now look at the older group, arguably our generation here,
right?
The boomers, where we're empty nesting, and maybe there are some regrets. Maybe there are some challenges now, because now our kids are adults and they have their own opinions and their own
Right.
things that maybe. So when we talk about finishing well, that could take on a whole different perspective
Right.
in your 60s versus in your 30s.
Sure.
Now that 30-year home loan is somebody else's home loan.
So true.
What are your thoughts on that? Because we
Depends
both
on if we co-signed on that 30-year loan for the other ones too, though.
Yeah, exactly.
We just got to notice our daughter Heidi, who actually makes more money than we do, and she has a master's degree from SC in business. But we just got a notice on a school loan that we had forgotten about for her SC grad work. And so that's why I'm laughing, because I was like, I had to call her and go, "Are you paying your loan?" She goes, "Yeah, why?" And I go, "Well, we got a notice." And it wasn't a late notice. It was more something else, but I was happy to hear that she was paying it. I interrupted you, but no, I think, I'm fascinated by this. I almost accidentally, I published a book called Doing Life with Your Adult Children, Keep Your Mouth Shut and the Welcome Mat Out. And when I say accidentally, it wasn't, Homeward, we focus on parenting and marriage, but we weren't thinking about the doing life people. But people kept coming up to us at our seminars. We're the largest provider of parenting seminars in the US. And they would go, "This is great for kids, but what about my adult child?" Right. So long story short, I ended up writing this book. And the book, today, it's the number 2 book somebody told me today, so it's not like I look it up all the time. It's the number 2 book on Amazon in Christian and Family. It was number 4 3 months ago. It was number 4 worldwide on Amazon's list. So it was ahead of Harry's, Prince Harry's book. I mean, it was nuts. So the book has gone crazy. I think it's because we were day-to-day parents until our kids were 18. Pretty much, they're, teenage years. We're not always day-to-day. And then all of a sudden, we have to give them the passport to adulthood, and that we're actually fired as a day-to-day parent. I mean, my kids, if we didn't fire ourselves, my kids fired me as a day-to-day parent. Now, they still call me dad. They still love me and on, but they wanted freedom. And then my experience there was that I had to learn something that was radical to me. I'm an advice giver. That's what I do. People pay me to give them advice, right? And right before this, I just did 2 hours of radio where I gave people advice. I was paid to do that, right? But my kids, the principle number 2 in that book is unsolicited advice is taken as criticism. And I went, why do my kids not want my advice? Well, what they hear is not my advice. They hear, "Dad or Mom don't think I'm all grown." So I think parents today who are in the empty nest are having a lot of trouble with their kids, with their adult kids, because maybe their kids are straying from faith. Their kids are violating their values. Not every kid, but that's the case. And so these parents are like, what on earth happened? We put our kids were at PCC. They have a fantastic youth group. Children's ministry is amazing. They heard the word of God, and now they're, bebopping someplace minus Christ. And it's shocking people. And so I think we have to do some work to understand, to not be one topic parents if our kids are straying, and still shower them with love and realize that this is a marathon, not a sprint. I kind of took off on your question, but I think in this empty nest, we have people going through what we call the empty nest syndrome, partly because they're in still the state of shock that their kids are not the kids they thought they were going to be, or that the kids they were. I mean, Kathy and I got married 1 week after college, and we became adults. And yet most kids today kind of meander toward responsibility, or meander toward adulthood. So you've got these emerging adults that are, causing us all kinds of havoc, and parents sometimes don't do well with that.
It's a dying to self, I think. It's a dying to, it's a void that you're not used to. It's probably tougher on your first kid than it is the third kid, because you're kind of like everything, right?
Totally. That's our family. You just named us. A lot tougher on our first kid and us on our first kid than with the third one. You're doing fine. Yeah.
Yeah, because you ask yourself as parents sometimes, why don't our kids like us? Right. And it's like, well, maybe we raised them to be independent, and this is the fruit of the effort.
We say this all the time. We have 3 daughters, so of course, no hormones or drama. And we say this all the time. We raised really independent girls, and now we're paying the price for that, and we're proud of them. In fact, Sunday, after church at PCC, I been speaking someplace else on Father's Day in another state. So my 3 girls took me out to dinner in Seal Beach, because I have 2 who live in LA. And so my San Clemente one and I drove up there. It was wonderful because I don't get just them. I get the grandkids, I get the son-in-laws, which I love. But just to have my daughters together was so cool. And they really did an affirming thing for me. But that's not always the case, because I remember Becca saying when she was 17, going to Dana Hills, all of my friends think you are the coolest dad. My head gets all big. And then I go, do you? She goes, no. You won't let me do this and you won't let me do that. You know, my head shrunk quickly.
So let me ask you a question, Jim, that is on topic but off topic. I guess it could attach to finishing well. But look, have you noticed a trend? And the reason I ask this is because I have, but I wanted to know if you have, that there can be a challenge and even an estranged relationship between a dad and their firstborn daughter. Have you noticed any of that?
Well, you know, I think it's kind of natural, especially if the firstborn is now married, because, you know, there's a leaving and cleaving. You know, when the Bible talks about you will leave your father and mother and be united to your, and this in the scripture Jesus is using is to your wife, but you know, it's the same thing. So sometimes in that dynamic, it's tougher because, you know, as dads, we've got to release them. You said that you're dying to yourself and you release them to this other guy who you may not even think is as good of a guy. Or if they're even as older young women and they're making some choices that you may not be happy with, that's hard. So I think there's a lot of things that go on. And and again, this is just me. So this is me, Jim, party of one. I do not have research on this, but I think sometimes your oldest, especially with a dad and a daughter, your oldest daughter, I mean, man, you put your life into their life. I mean, you know, when the day Christy was born, my heart got wrapped around her heart, and it's all confusing. In fact, I know that there are times in my relationship with my wife, Kathy, that I let Christy get in the way of it because I loved Christy so much. It didn't mean that I didn't love Kathy, but you know, and all of a sudden now Christy's away at Point Loma Nazarene for a while, and then you know she gets married, and you know it's not tension, but there's, you know, we're not as close as we used to be. So what I've learned as an adult dad, so with my, you know, with Christy, I try to get together with her about once a month and just her. In fact, I was Monday, I actually had breakfast here in Dana Point with her husband, which was wonderful. But with Christy, I try to proactively do that. And, you know, I found that to be really, really good. To come back, because we went like a long time without just really connecting, and I miss that. But Christy did too. So you know, I'm still paying even though they're adults. So eventually that's, I hope, change. But I have found that that's been a good thing on the positive side. But yeah, I think it's a natural.
Yeah,
you have this very special relationship, and then it changes. And
yeah, it might have something to do with the other guy, right? Because now there's a new man in life, and sometimes they're forced to choose because of even pressure from the other side.
Right. Well, and you think about sometimes guys like you and me. I mean, here we are, pastor types. So I can remember Christy, my oldest, saying, all of my boyfriends are intimidated by you, Dad. And I go, how do I intimidate them? I'm like, I'm trying to be really friendly. She goes, it's just you. You know, they're not you. Well, I go, well, they're 16 years old. They're 7. Of course they're not me, you know, in terms of this. But, you know, it's hard. So in some ways, we've never been the parent of an adult daughter or son, and they've never been an adult. So we don't really know what to do. So it's that kind of awkward dance. And I'm learning now that my kids are in their 30s. So now that they're in their 30s, it's a lot easier, even with the guys and whatnot, because I've kind of had to relinquish a lot of me. You know, part of the Christian life is relinquishing your will to the will of God, right? Well, part of the Christian life is relinquishing your children to God and to their new family. And I'm not saying that's easy, because that's hard.
Yeah, you've touched on a couple points there to keep those relationships in place. And I've had this question with multiple dads of adult kids that, oh yeah, you know, we're going, you know, on a cruise together. Or, yeah, we're going out to dinner. Or they're flying up to see us. And then And my question usually is, who's paying? And so I'm seeing a trend here that this closeness is has a financial aspect to it versus them paying for their own airfares or them, that kind of thing.
Well, I think with some families they can do that. Some families just can't. So you don't go airfare, you go camping or whatever it is.
Exactly.
So because I travel so much, I have, frequent flyer miles galore. So once a year we go on a family trip and I pay. Admittedly, it's $5.60 because it's just the little tax you have to pay on the thing. Sounds great, doesn't it? But we go to some pretty cool places, so the kids want to go there. And I remember us spending most of a week as with the entire family in Park City. Hawaii is going to be happening for us, but I find that that's for Kathy and I, that's good stewardship money if we can get our kids to do that. Now, I've noticed over the years, now that our kids are older, that I go, like I said, hey, you guys are on your own if you want to do car rentals. I'm not doing your car rental type of thing, or I'm not, this. And the only hope we have if we're all together is that we'll do 3 dinners together, and that we want to we have grandkids, so we want to watch the grandkids, and you guys go out and have fun. We're not paying for that. And I found over the years that there's kind of a changing, with that, but you just say it up front, let them know what you're going to do up front, and keep it at that.
Great. So we only have a few minutes left, but I did want to touch on your point 2 in your message as being, because I started looking, I look at every message that I do and you as well, and whoever we have on, what could be the countercultural pushback? And your point 2 was run light. Yeah. And I thought, boy, that's a hard one in South Orange County. If you live in an affluent area,
yes,
because the value and worth is what you have, size of your home, decor, the cars you drive, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Speak a little bit about that, of how maybe a younger person can process that.
Well, I'm not saying that we all move next door to you in Montana when you're out there and live in a commune. I'm not saying that. I'm saying we have to figure.
That's good. I'm glad.
Right. It crowds you out on that fishing. But I'm saying, and that's what people naturally think. Well, then maybe we can't live in South Orange County. I think people can live in South Orange County, but it takes incredible discipline. And I get the privilege periodically to speak at the PCC MOPS, young generation, incredible moms. By the way, we have a great MOPS program, honestly, and the mentor moms are wonderful, right? So what I find with them is that their husbands, these women, are busy, and they want relationship with their husbands. Their husbands are just beginning in work, so they're working extra. These people are sometimes working 2 jobs and the women are working, and they're just figuring it out. I find that these women would rather have some connection time with their spouses than live in a more expensive mortgage or a more expensive rent payment or whatever. And so the discipline and they have kids. So the discipline of saying, no, our kids can play one sport or they can be in one dance thing, but they can't be in 10. Because what we do is we get the South Orange County, the mindset is, they need to be in, soccer, baseball, dance, acting, and that's just on Tuesday, and then we'll do something else on Wednesday. That's not healthy. So this is where parents have to say, you know what, honey, we as a family, Monday night is our family night, and we're gonna have other priorities, and that means going against the grain of the culture. I think the ones who do it are courageous, and I think they actually do a lot better. Because a quote that I used, and I love this quote, I actually love the book by John Mark Comer, hurry is violence to your soul. So what I'm saying to a lot of people in South Orange County is our souls are being damaged because we are so busy. When I graduated from Princeton 100 years ago in the 70s, a friend of mine wrote me a note, and he's a pastor now. And he wrote me and he said, "Dear Jim, we missed you at graduation," because I didn't stay. I graduated. I did my thing. Boom, I'm gone. Coming back here to do ministry. And he said, if the devil can't make you bad, he'll make you busy. And I'm not the one who's ever been in the arms of another woman or, embezzled money, but I'm going to be so busy doing important things that I'm going to miss the most important things.
Yeah.
So I think we have to be careful that we don't buy into the cultural norm of busyness. Now, again, I'm not saying that we only sit back. There's a blend here, but I mean, you look at Scripture in Exodus. The Bible says, that God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, and on the seventh day He rested. And as you well know, because you're a lot better scholar than I am on this, He rested and was refreshed. That actually means He exhaled. He took a breath. A lot of us don't take breaths. We're busy on Saturday because it's our day off, but we're busier because we've got all the chores to do or whatever.
Yep. The tyranny of the urgent. It is
exactly
a challenge. Well, we're out of time, but I want to give you a chance, 30-second snapshot. Give us an idea of Jim Burns, his ministry, what you've been focused on the last few decades.
Okay, great. Well, Homeward. It's called Homeward, HOMEWORD. They can go to homeward.com, learn all about us. We are the largest provider of parenting seminars, but we have blogs, podcasts, all free stuff. We do have our resources, and they're great. We have books as well as courses that people use all around the world. They're in Spanish and English. And our books are in 27 different languages. So I'm excited about what we do. 4 values, and I'll close this off, but strong marriages, confident parents, empowered kids, and healthy leaders. And so all of our content, all of our ministry is geared toward that. We have some incredible staff, much more than just, me. It's not the Jim Burns show here. And I'm so honored to be a part of it. I've loved what I'm doing. So anyway, homeward.com, and that's where they can find what we talked about, finding joy in the empty nest, doing life with your adult children. I tell people it doesn't have to be my books. Read 1 marriage book a year, read 1 parenting book a year. And even if you're older, do that. And there's great resources. There's always going to be a tip. And Homeward is one of those resource ministries that comes along the church. We don't believe we can take the church is where it's at. So what I love about what's going on at PCC is that, when you're doing small groups or the VBS or things like that, that's where the rubber meets the road. Our organization is geared to come alongside you and come alongside parents to help them succeed. But it is not the main thing. The main thing is the church. That's the bride of Christ. And so we just want to come alongside and serve the church.
Well, I appreciate our relationship. Decades of it, and you've come alongside, and you've been a blessing not only to church at large internationally, but our local church, Pacific Coast Church. So thanks again for speaking and preaching on Sunday and coming on Facebook Live.
My pleasure. It was fun. Okay, Mark. God bless.
All right. See you, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. And don't forget, join the PCC Facebook group, and we'll give you links to resources for Jim Burns and to help your marriage, your family, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you for joining us. God bless you guys.